She could do with a bit of luck herself, couldn't she? Angela Merkel, we're talking about in the newspapers. Alison could do with some Taylor Swift luck.
That's right, sir. As she is on, as you saw, she was on the front page of all the French papers. No different in Europe after that failure to form a coalition government. We can see her looking pretty exhausted, it has to be said, on the front page of the Financial Times today. That photo was taken during a meeting with her MPs yesterday. The paper says it's still too early to predict the Chancellor's fall, but she has shown her political mortality. The Guardian, meanwhile, is wondering, is this, there we got the right image. The Guardian, meanwhile, is wondering, is this the start of the post-Merkel era? The paper is particularly concerned about what it means for the future of the EU, since they say Merkel has always played a very decisive role in solving the EU's problems, whether it be migration conflicts or the conflicts with Russia and Turkey. And they say this weekend's failure in Berlin is the start of very difficult times. The alarm is also being sounded across the Atlantic. Yasha Munk, writing in Slate, says that the collapse of coalition talks in Germany bodes badly for democratic governments everywhere. And the writer adds that it is astounding how quickly politics have descended into chaos on both sides of the Atlantic.
There's one set of people who found are particularly enjoying this. This is British cartoonists, isn't it?
Right, they've been finding all kinds of creative ways to depict Angela Merkel's downfall. In this cartoon from Seamus Jennings in the Daily Telegraph, we see Merkel still looking quite tough there on the left as a circus strongman. But of course, if you look behind the scenes, we see that now the strength is really just a facade on the right there. Meanwhile, in the Times, we see Merkel as a German general, but we can see that the federal eagle on top of her helmet has transformed into a lame duck.
Oh dear, not so good. Other cartoons focusing on some of Merkel's choices for political alliances.
Right, and one choice, which isn't really a choice because Merkel herself has already ruled it out, is the far-right AfD party. That's who we see here in this cartoon from Marian Kamensky, an Austrian cartoonist. The AfD there is asking a very battered-looking Merkel, "Are you sure you don't want to marry me?" And then the Socialist Party, meanwhile, is unfortunately much less willing. You can see in this cartoon from Der Tagesspiegel, Martin Schulz, the leader of the German Socialist Party. He's there kind of cowering, hiding in the corner from Angela Merkel as she wanders around trying to find him. Martin Schulz has refused to form a coalition with Merkel, but some German papers are continuing to hope. One writer in the Hamburger Morgen Post today makes the case for why the so-called Grand Coalition is better than holding new elections. This writer says the Socialist Party should have the guts to show that it is ready to take on more responsibility than the Jamaica egoists.
OK, we shall see how it pans out, of course. Now, let's move to the US for this next story. The Trump administration has announced that Haitians granted refuge in the US, this is after the 2010 earthquake, will have to get ready to pack their bags.
Right, devastating news for the some 60,000 Haitians who are living in the US. They've been living there for the past 7 years. Many of them have started families there. They will lose their deportation protection in 2019, which means that they'll have just about 18 months from now to get their affairs in order and leave the country. The Trump administration says that the extraordinary conditions that justified their presence are no longer valid. Well, the Miami Herald points out in an editorial that this is not true. They say Haiti is perpetually struggling, and even the U.S. actually failed to deliver on its post-earthquake promises in Haiti. The Miami Herald said, if the richest country in the hemisphere can't deliver in Haiti, well, how can it expect the poorest to do so 7 years after the worst natural disaster in modern history? Now, since the U.S. isn't providing, Haitians in the U.S. are going to have to look somewhere else, and the CBC is reporting that Canada is bracing itself for a surge of asylum seekers crossing the border. Now, the Trump administration's announcement wasn't exactly unexpected. Haitians were actually placed on alert earlier this year, and the CBC reports that at that time, waves of people already started crossing into Canada illegally. They were receiving over 200 people a day at one point.
Another story, the US, celebrating national holiday, Thanksgiving, of course, this week. American media is reporting on the two turkeys. We mentioned them earlier, but the American media are full of it in the papers. They have something to be thankful for, don't they?
They sure are. They sure do. Turkeys are the key ingredient in the traditional Thanksgiving meal. Millions are slaughtered every year. But as you may already know, and as you already saw, the tradition in the US is that the president pardons one, or in recent years, 2 turkeys at the White House. Well, it turns out another part of that tradition, which I did not know about until today, is that the night before they get to spend the night in a really, really swanky hotel in D.C. You can
they can't even lie down, can they?
Right?
Anyway.
The roosting and those little cushions. But it looks like they're having a good time. That is Drumstick and Wishbone, as they've been named, having the time of their lives last night. And as I think you've said before, Stuart, it wasn't a Trump hotel. No. They're staying actually in a bipartisan room at the Willard Hotel. Hopefully Trump won't hold it against him, though, and will still decide to pardon them later today.
Do you think they've got little chocolate on the pillow?
Right, I hope so. They eat chocolate.
I don't know. I have no idea. How do they get the wrappers off as well?
They need to be fattened up, right?
Exactly. All right, thanks a lot, Alison, with the press review for us.